Vaccines typically take years to develop, but there's reasons to be hopeful that we could have a vaccine against the coronavirus pandemic in record time. There are more than 40 vaccine candidates being developed currently, according to the WHO. At a basic level, the evolution of vaccines, we've gone from testing a weakened or killed version of the virus to injecting a protein that can fight against the virus. When we think of the SARS outbreak in 2002-2003, it took about 20 months to go from genetic sequence to that first patient being dosed in a first clinical trial. Leading the pack is Moderna, an upstart, buzzy biotech that developed a vaccine candidate that has already started a clinical trial. That is record-breaking pace in about 2 months' time. So this happened about 10 times as quick. How did Moderna do it? They have a technology platform called messenger RNA. I talked to the CEO a few weeks ago. He sees this as the evolution of vaccine development that is particularly geared for speedy development of vaccines. Now Moderna just injects genetic instructions that has your own cells create copies of the protein, the antibodies that can fight against the virus. On the flip side, there are no approved mRNA vaccines on the market, so this is an unproven technology that will be tested in real time against the coronavirus. There's about 6 or 7 companies that have put out timelines for coronavirus vaccines where they're hoping to start clinical trials in 2020. So those candidates will enter the clinic in the spring or summer for the most part and have data coming a few months after that. That initial data will focus more on safety, making sure these vaccines don't cause side effects and they're tolerable in humans. Additional studies have to be run that test if it actually works, if getting the vaccine can prevent infections of the coronavirus. Some of the biggest drug makers in the industry, including Sanofi and Johnson & Johnson, have also jumped in the mix. Johnson & Johnson is looking at starting a clinical trial in November. Sanofi has estimated they can start a clinical trial in early 2021. So those are much longer timelines as far as starting a clinical trial. They kind of envision a tortoise and a hare situation where they have proven technology, they've done this many times, they have the resources of big pharma to pump out this to a mass market of hundreds of millions of people if needed. So those approaches are also worth watching, and they're moving as fast as they can on that front. Vaccine development is really expensive, and with infectious diseases, it's hard to know the return on investment for these companies. So there's a big funding gap with vaccine development that remains unanswered. It's worth considering the case of Merck, one of the biggest drug makers in the world. They have the only FDA-approved Ebola vaccine. That took several years of clinical trials at unprecedented scale. Merck had to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to get this over the finish line, and it's essentially a net loss for the company financially. One group that's really helped accelerate the pace of vaccine development is called CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness of Innovations. This was started by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with a lot of other philanthropic support in 2017. It's backed and funded the progression of candidates, including Moderna's, as well as several other vaccines in the early stages. There's a lot of unknowns surrounding a coronavirus vaccine. Not just is it safe and effective, but when we get to that point, or if we get to that point with a vaccine candidate, what happens next? How much data will the FDA require? Could the FDA offer an emergency approval? What would pricing and accessibility look like? Particularly if a small biotech like Moderna or some of these other small companies that are progressing candidates into the clinic in 2020, if one of those vaccines is found to be safe and effective, how can a small biotech scale that up to deliver a vaccine to hundreds of millions of people? It still remains to be seen if these companies need to run much larger clinical trials enrolling tens of thousands of people. Who will pay for that? How much will it cost? And these companies, which are for-profit pharmaceutical companies, can they make a return of investment on that and make a business case for that? Or will philanthropic sources like CEPI, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, have to step up to push some of these vaccines over the finish line?